All right, I just finished reading this book, Triple Exclam, about Emory Tate, the late Emory Tate, and I just wanted to say a couple words about the legend as I experienced it. Maybe it reflect a little bit uh, on chess history. So, uh, one thing people should appreciate is the thing about Emory is that everybody who came in contact with him, whether who were titled players, who played him a little bit and saw him at tournaments, had questions. It was just like a real enigma about the dude. And the first way to understand it is here was this guy running around tournaments playing chess, and he could speak Russian, you know? And we always had the thought that the Russians were cheating. And I think they were just wanting to talk about the games amongst themselves, you know. But back in the day, you know, they'd go out for a smoke and talk in Russian and whatever. And Emery could understand what they were saying. So that was already weird. But he would never talk about it. And I still have a lot of questions about what's going on. The book, I feel, doesn't get into it, can't get into it because Emery was opaque himself on what was going on in that chapter of his life. There's a lot of people, conspiracy theories, whatever, but it was just a weird enigma. In any case, what the book relates is somewhere around 92, he leaves the military. No one knows why. Seems like some kind of CIA stuff. I don't know. Nobody knows. But in order to understand what this guy was about, you have to understand the guy was had this enigmatic quality about him. He never let in on that part of his life. And I think there's a variety of areas the guy never let himself or other people in on his life. And that's the next thing, is that one of the things that's characteristic of him is he had this exterior of bravado / toxic masculinity / extreme confidence that simply couldn't be shaken. So for example, I and a lot of other guys engage in bouts of toxic masculinity, and it's very enjoyable, right? So I'm playing streaming chess online or something, talking some smack. It's a lot of fun, right? But then, of course, in a sense, I break character. I'm not always that guy, right? What was fascinating about Emory was he was always that guy. It never broke. There was no chink in the facade. You know, so it was like, wow, what's going on with this guy? Which made him also even more enigmatic to people. Like, what's he hiding behind the exterior? So the first memory I want to share is I had seen him at various tournaments before, and I think it was 1991. But I just want to share this experience because he spoke to me then and now. So we were playing the U.S. Junior Closed 1991, I believe it was. And it was in Bloomington, Illinois. Middle of nowhere. Absolute middle of nowhere. And Emory shows up. Wants to play blitz against people. Well, as it comes out from the book, I think what was going on is he had a family in Elkhart, Indiana, hours and hours away, which means the dude drove way over just to play these people some blitz and check out like the next generation of American talent or something like that. And, you know, we're playing rounds ourselves. It's not like we have a bunch of times to be playing blitz on the side, but he comes down, maybe spent a day or two, and it was really interesting and weird. Right away, you know, there was definitely a discrepancy in like, he didn't have a what you could call a classical understanding of chess. He hadn't studied the classics, hadn't read a lot, and I think just improved by playing and then thinking about the games he had played, like in a combat kind of mode. And I think then he didn't have the respect because of that. And especially back then, it's hard for people now to understand, but before the advent of computers, there was a definite hierarchy, right? Like there were people above you and they understood more, they had more experience, and you know, you did not easily question them. And then for him to show up and, you know, not have a understanding of the game. Imagine it like a priest. Like a priest has this aura of authority. And why? Because he has some kind of authority. And that's kind of what the old time masters had about them, that now with the computer where Stockfish is now rated 4,000 or something ridiculous, there's no human hierarchy that exists in the same way. Okay, so The next thing that really blew my mind, in fact, got me thinking back on Emory, was I had no knowledge really of his son, Andrew Tate. And then that guy was on James Altucher's podcast. I've coached a little bit with James Altucher, strong player himself. And very fascinating, James got immediate blowback for even having the guy on his show because he had this incredible mix of toxic masculinity, extreme bravado, extreme confidence, and never showing a chink in that armor. And it was very interesting to me. I was like, wow, I have never seen a carbon copy in a father-son relationship. Definitely I've seen similarities. There's always some kind of similarity. If you look hard enough for it, you're going to find it. But that was spooky. See it in the son. And then, one of the things I wanted to talk about is just how chess, the culture has changed. And one of the things I want to say is, and the book kind of brings this out, is Emory, especially after he leaves the military in 92 and tries to do chess, it's a tale of extreme poverty and sadness. And I remember well this period of chess where it felt like there's nothing really to strive for, both in terms of monetary goals, but also like these little tournaments you're playing across the United States. There was never any norms involved. There was never like the prospect of like, oh, I'm going to go and, become an IM or a GM. Those norm tournaments really didn't exist back in the day. Definitely not for Emory in the 80s or 90s. And in my case, I had the chance to live in Europe, but then I was an academic. And like Emory, I had different life paths. Different life paths happened to me because chess wasn't an obvious option, right? And then when I tried to make chess an option, same thing happened with me and Emory. Like, oh, we're going to teach children. And I'll tell you, it's a hard road. It's a hard road, and it's not a happy road. And in Emory's case, there's like, if you don't keep some kind of discipline, we're gonna fall out. And that's what happened to Emory. And I hadn't really understood that. By the way, back in the day, I don't think anyone knew he had a family. That's an example of like, you could get kind of close to the guy. You can analyze with him, make jokes with him. But I don't think he ever told any of us that he had a family. No, I don't think so. I really don't. So that's just one of the many ways in which you kind of think you know somebody, you have no idea. It was a complete enigma. And that history of poverty, I think, is really important when you think about that generation of players. And there are several in that generation who had turned to alcoholism and other forms of self-destructive behavior. Especially people, there was Midwest Masters, all kinds of people, just was destroying people. And it's interesting now to think about. One of the things I wanted to say is if Emory were alive and streaming, oh man, just like his son, who makes this big splash in the social media world by being exactly who Emory was, Emory would have made it. Oh man, he would have made it big. He would have been a star. The guy's charisma and able to talk about the game and talk some smack, fantastic. I would have listened to that guy's stream for sure, right? But that didn't exist. And because that didn't exist, his life took on a totally different trajectory. Whereas his son, living now in this time, huge success, right? And like Emory would have been too, would have been canceled. Emory would have been canceled for sure, just like his son. Forget about it, no chance. And that's just another thing I wanted to say in closing that's different now, right? Is back in the day, there was a kind of privacy, i.e. you could go party and do ridiculous things and no one would really know or remember it. If someone knew, it was kind of hearsay that it existed. Or if you said something ridiculous, now it's always out there and there's no escaping it. So it was the fascinating differences between these two characters, the father and the son, both so similar in terms of how they approach life, but then completely different because the circumstances that life has afforded them. All right, just a quick thoughts then. There it is, Triple Exclam by Daaim Shabazz, The Life and Games of Emory Tate.